Alright guys, today we're going to look at how we could represent an equation, which we can find this equation given this table. So we've actually already been talking about linear relationships in those equations. We've talked about those unit rate words, each, every, per, a, and those would be our coefficient. And then our constant is what's happening just the one time. So we've talked about the verbal descriptions and then gone from there. Then we talked about inequalities and looked for those key words and phrases to solve that. And so now we're coming back and saying, okay, how would I figure out which one of these equations would represent this relationship on the right from this table? Remember, x is your input that's being put into the equation. We're going to substitute for those values. It's also your dependent variable. Y is your output. This is what's coming out of the equation once we're doing something with x and either adding or subtracting with it. And that's also called your dependent variable because you can't have a change in y unless there's a change in x. So we want to see which one of these equations will match with what's going on here. So if we start with any value, you can start with x is 0, x is 2, x is 4, x is 6, or x is 10. It doesn't really matter. So let's look at letter A. So we're just going to substitute these values in and see what we get. So y equals 2x plus 12. So I'm just going to do this one, okay? I'm going to substitute 4 for x. So y equals 2 groups of 4 plus 12. Then we're going to follow order of operations and see if this gives me the correct answer. So y equals 2 times 4 is 8. Remember, we're going to multiply before we add or subtract. In case you need to see this, grouping symbols first, exponents, multiply and divide from left to right, then add and subtract from left to right. So the P stands for parentheses, but it could also be any grouping symbols like brackets. So that's why we had to do our multiplication first. Yes, there are parentheses, but remember if there's just a number in the parentheses next to another number, that just means to multiply. So that's why we did that step first. And then 8 plus 12 is 20. So we were looking for when x was 4, my input was 4, y was 28. And that's not what we got. So we don't even have to check all the other ones because if it doesn't work for one of the values, it's not going to work for any. Okay, so let's look at answer choice B. Y equals 4x plus 6. Okay, well I'm going to do purple on this one, change it up. Let's try this one. Y equals, just change the color to help us out so we can see it a little bit better. So when x is 0, so when I plug x is 0, so when x is 0, I want my output, my y, to be 4. Well, 4 times 0 is 0, multiply first, and 0 plus 6 is 6, and that's not what we have here. So that means this equation could not be it. Now, if you look at the next one, these actually kind of make sense because anything times 0 and then adding 4, anything times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 4 is 4. So that's another way that we could have maybe looked at these two first. But that's okay that we didn't, just something to think about. So let's go ahead and look at letter C. So we're just kind of process of elimination. So we can say, let's try this one. Y equals 2x plus 4. And again, it doesn't matter which ones you try. You could stick with when x is 0, y is 4, and you can have done that for all of them. We're just kind of showing you that you can change it up as well. So y equals 2. I'm going to say when x is 2. So y is 2 groups of 2 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. So in order for this equation to work, when x was 2, my y needed to be 8, and that's what we have here. So we finally are going to figure out that it's letter D. But we want to prove it with the math as well, just to make sure, because what if we made a mathematical mistake over here? So let's try this one out, just to make sure. And then we'll talk about some mental math that we could do as well, just to make sure to double check. So let's try this one. When x is 10, so 6 groups of 10 plus 4. So 6 groups of 10, or 6 times 10 is 60. Bring down the plus 4. 60 plus 4 is 64. So when x was 10, y was 64. That checks out. Okay, ideally what we should be doing is checking all of these, but let's just talk about the math real quick. If we put 6 right here, 6 times 6 is 36. 36 plus 4 is 40, so that would work out. If I put 4 and put that right there, 6 times 4 is 24. 24 plus 4 is 28. That would work out. If I take the number 2 for x and plug that in, 6 times 2 is 12. 12 plus 4 is 16. And this one should work again as well. 6 times 0 when x is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. That's called our zero product property. And 0 plus 4 is 4. So all values are true for this equation. So this is the equation that matches this table. So if you're given a table and you have to figure out what equation it works with, that's what you need to do, is substitute your x values and see if the outputs are correct. But remember, you should be checking all of them, because sometimes it will work with 1 or 2 of the values, but it has to work with all of them to make sure it's correct.